There exists, in the cartographic imagination of the ancient world, a place that marks the absolute boundary of the known. It's not a wall, not a chasm, but an island, perpetually shrouded in mist, where the sea itself congeals into a substance neither water nor ice, and where the sun, during the height of summer, never fully descends below the horizon. The Greeks called it Thule. The Romans named it Ultima Thule, the furthest shore, the final destination, the place beyond which no mortal could venture and return unchanged. Virgil wrote of it in his Georgics as a land at the ends of the earth, a realm where the natural order bends and falters. Seneca, centuries later, prophesied that a time would come when the ocean would loose its chains, when new worlds would be revealed, and Thule would no longer mark the limits of existence. But in the centuries before such revelations, Thule stood as something more than geography. It was the edge of comprehension itself, the point at which empirical knowledge surrendered to myth. Maps gave way to warnings written in the margins. Here, the world ends. Welcome back to Whispered Chronicles, Echoes of Forgotten Lore. This is not a story of a single island. This is the story of how humanity creates its boundaries, how we inscribe them onto parchment and stone, and how those boundaries shift, dissolve, and transform into metaphor. This is the cartography of the impossible. It's the mapping of a place that may never have existed, yet has never ceased to exist in the minds of explorers, philosophers, and dreamers. This is the Chronicle of Thule. The first man to claim he had reached Thule was not a soldier, not a conqueror, but a merchant and astronomer from the Greek colony of Massalia, modern-day Marseille. His name was Pytheas, and sometime around 325 years before the Common Era, he embarked on a voyage that would cement his name in the annals of exploration and controversy in equal measure. Pytheas was a meticulous observer. He understood the relationship between latitude and the length of daylight. He calculated the position of the North Star with remarkable precision. He was, by all accounts, a scientist in an age when science and speculation were often indistinguishable. But when he returned from his northern expedition and recorded what he had witnessed, the intellectual elite of the Mediterranean world regarded his testimony with suspicion, disbelief, and outright mockery. He claimed to have sailed beyond Britain, beyond the Orkney Islands, into a realm where the boundaries between sea and sky dissolved into a substance he described as the lung of the sea. Modern scholars interpret this as pack ice or dense sea fog, but to those who read his account, it sounded like the description of a world unraveling at its seams. He spoke of a place where the summer sun hung in the sky for nearly the entire night, descending only briefly before rising again. He spoke of tides so extreme they seemed to defy the natural rhythm of the ocean. And he spoke of Thule. The island, as Pytheas described it, lay 6 days sailing north of Britain. It was inhabited, he said, though sparsely. The people there lived on the edge of survival, harvesting grain and honey, keeping livestock in a land where agriculture was a constant struggle against cold and darkness. Some later writers claimed Pytheas described a frozen sea beyond Thule, a place where the ocean itself had solidified and where no ship could pass. Others suggested he spoke of a place where fire, water, and air existed in some primordial, undifferentiated state, a return to the chaos that preceded creation. But Pytheas offered no empire, no treasure, no strategic advantage. His Thule was not a land ripe for conquest. It was simply there, at the edge of the navigable world, and perhaps for that reason, his contemporaries dismissed him. The geographer Strabo, writing centuries later, declared Pytheas a liar. Polybius accused him of fabrication. Even those who grudgingly acknowledged that he might have traveled north refused to believe he had gone as far as he claimed. Yet the name endured. Thule entered the lexicon of the ancient world, not as a confirmed location, but as a concept. A place that existed in the liminal space between report and rumor, between cartography and conjecture. And as Rome expanded its dominion across the known world, Thule would be rediscovered, reimagined, and repurposed for an entirely different kind of map. To the Romans, the world was an empire. Geography was not a passive science, but a tool of statecraft, a means of asserting control, defining boundaries, and projecting power. When Roman cartographers and historians turned their attention to the far north, they did not seek to understand Thule. They sought to claim it, to inscribe it into the mythology of Roman dominion, to make it the outermost marker of their reach, even if that reach was purely symbolic. The poet Virgil invoked Thule in his Georgics, describing it as a land that would one day bow to Roman authority. It was a poetic flourish, a rhetorical gesture meant to suggest that Rome's influence extended to the very edges of existence. But rhetoric, repeated often enough, begins to solidify into fact. Thule appeared on Roman maps, though its location was never fixed. Some placed it near the Shetland Islands. Others suggested the coast of Norway. A few ventured that it might be Iceland, that volcanic island emerging from the North Atlantic like a fragment of another world. Ptolemy, the great Alexandrian geographer of the 2nd century, included Thule in his comprehensive atlas of the known world. He positioned it at a latitude far to the north, though his calculations were speculative at best. Ptolemy's maps were not meant to be navigational tools in the modern sense. They were theoretical constructs, attempts to impose order and symmetry onto a world that resisted such neat categorization. Thule, in Ptolemy's geography, served as a necessary anchor, a fixed point in the far north that balanced the known lands of the south. But Thule was more than a dot on a map. It was a propaganda instrument. Roman writers used it to emphasize the vastness of their empire, the extent of their knowledge, the superiority of their civilization. To know Thule was to master the unknown. To name it was to domesticate it. And yet, beneath the rhetoric, a curious contradiction persisted. No Roman legion ever set foot on Thule. No Roman governor ever administered its lands. No Roman tax collector ever extracted tribute from its inhabitants. Thule remained, in the most literal sense, beyond Rome's grasp. And so it drifted. With each retelling, with each new map, Thule shifted. It migrated across the northern seas, appearing first as one island, then as another, sometimes vanishing entirely, only to re-emerge in a different location. Medieval cartographers, inheriting the traditions of Ptolemy and Strabo, continued the practice. Thule appeared on the Hereford Mappa Mundi, on the maps of illiteracy, on the Portolan charts of Italian merchants. It was sometimes Iceland. Sometimes it was the Faroe Islands. Sometimes it was a phantom landmass that existed only in the collective imagination of those who stared at the blank spaces on their maps and needed a name to fill the void. By the age of exploration, when European navigators began to chart the Atlantic with increasing precision, Thule had become a problem. It was a place that could not be verified, a legend that interfered with the emerging science of empirical cartography. And so, gradually, it faded from the maps. It was replaced by Iceland, by Greenland, by the delineated coastlines of Scandinavia. The island itself ceased to exist, but the idea did not. In the medieval and Renaissance periods, something remarkable occurred. Thule underwent a transformation that had nothing to do with geography and everything to do with the human need for symbolic boundaries. It ceased to be an island in the physical sense and became a concept, a placeholder for the ultimate, the unreachable, the horizon that recedes no matter how far one travels. Scholars and mystics began to speak of Ultima Thule, not as a destination, but as a metaphor. It represented the limits of human knowledge, boundary beyond which reason could not penetrate. In alchemical texts, Thule appeared as a symbol of the philosopher's stone, the perfected substance that transmutes base matter into gold and base souls into enlightenment. It was the goal of the great work, forever sought, rarely attained, and never possessed for long. In political philosophy, Thule became the emblem of the ideal state, the perfect society that exists only in theory. Thomas More borrowed the concept when he constructed his Utopia, a fictional island in the Atlantic where reason and virtue governed in perfect harmony. The word utopia itself means no place, an acknowledgement that such perfection cannot exist in the material world. Thule, by this time, had become synonymous with that same impossibility, a place that must exist in order for us to orient ourselves, that can never be reached without ceasing to be what it is. The Romantic poets of the 18th and 19th centuries revived Thule once more, this time as a symbol of the sublime, the distant, the eternally mysterious. It appeared in the works of Goethe, who wrote of the König in Thule, the king of Thule who mourns his lost beloved with a golden chalice. The poem is not about a place. It is about memory, fidelity, and the way the past becomes a country we can no longer visit. Thule, in Gerda's hands, is the land of what has been lost, shore we departed long ago and can never regain. In the 20th century, Thule was appropriated for darker purposes. Nationalist movements seized upon it as a symbol of racial purity, of an imagined northern paradise inhabited by an idealized people. The Thule Society, founded in Germany in the aftermath of the First World War, invoked the name to lend mystical legitimacy to ideologies of exclusion and domination. Thule, which had once represented the outer limit of human aspiration, is perverted into a symbol of inward-looking tribalism. A boundaries drawn not to inspire exploration, but to enforce separation. Yet even this corruption could not destroy the deeper resonance of the name. Thule persists in our language, in our literature, in our capacity to imagine what lies beyond the edge of the map. It has migrated from geography to philosophy, from philosophy to psychology. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as a journey toward the self, a process that resembles the voyage to Thule, a movement toward an inner horizon that can be approached but never fully possessed. Thule is the place we are always sailing toward and never arriving at. It is the question that cannot be answered, the mystery that cannot be solved, the shore that recedes as we advance. And perhaps that is its greatest gift. Not a location, but a reminder that the journey itself is the destination. Every civilization needs its Thule. Every map requires a place beyond which the known world ends and the unknown begins. For the Greeks, it was a frozen island in the north. For the Romans, it was the outermost boundary of the empire. For the alchemists, it was the perfected state of matter and soul. The Romantics, it was the lost homeland of memory and longing. For us, it might be the edge of the observable universe, the point at which our telescopes can no longer penetrate the darkness. It might be the singularity at the heart of a black hole, where the laws of physics cease to function and knowledge collapses into paradox. It might be the boundary between consciousness and unconsciousness, the liminal space we traverse in dreams and return from with only fragments of recollection. Or perhaps Thule is simply the acknowledgement that there will always be something beyond, that no matter how far we travel, no matter how much we learn, there will always be another shore, another horizon, another map to draw. Pythias believed he had reached the edge of the world, and in a sense, he had. But the edge moves. It always has. It always will. Thule is not a place. It is a question. The question is this: what lies beyond? Not in the sense of physical geography, but in the sense of human possibility. What knowledge have we not yet discovered? What truths have we not yet spoken? What versions of ourselves have we not yet become? Seneca was right. Time came when the ocean loosed its chains. New worlds were revealed. Thule ceased to mark the end of all things. But it did not disappear, it simply moved further out, into the unmapped territories of the mind, the spirit, the cosmos. It waits there still. This has been Whispered Chronicles, Echoes of Forgotten Lore. Thank you for joining us on this journey to the furthest shore. Please subscribe so you don't miss our next adventure. Until we meet again, in the shadows of forgotten lore, may you always find a horizon worth chasing, and as always, stay safe.